In case you want to contact me, you've got a phone number, an office number, pager number, an email. The best way is email, or the best way is pager. If you ever want to actually talk to me, because I'm rarely, if ever, in my office. Case in point, that's why I'm here now. Email is also a pretty good way, though I haven't checked it for a couple of days, but I should probably admit to that. Anyway, well, this is starting up great. There we go. All right, I got it figured out, I think. Okay, the objectives and purpose of this exam. This program that we have is to assist you in answering the questions. I will say that I specifically have written some of these to somewhat replicate or mimic some of the way the questions are worded. If you see anything that's highlighted, underline, when I say highlighted, bold, a different color, underline, a combination of all three, guess what? That is something that one of you, or some of you, will see. By the way, there's three, and we'll go through this, there's three different tests, A, B, and C. They basically have very similar questions, they're just in different order so that technically you can't look over the other guy's shoulder and copy his wrong answers. Okay, start off with you've paid a $35 licensing fee. That's good for 5 years. It's a renewal. Your renewal is $35. If you need to replace a lost or mutilated one, it's $10. And by the way, where you get that is from the Division of Measurement Standards. Okay, you don't get it from the local county. And you'll notice that this is highlighted, bolded, that's bolded, and that's bolded. So guess what? You're probably very likely to see this. Just to read, I'm not going to read all of this to you, and actually if you want text like this, you can actually get it off of our website, which I do believe was on the letter that was sent to most of you. Okay, but it deals with what the work you're performing and what our requirements are of you. This is very generic. It's good for taximeters and CNG, okay, and everything in between and away from those. Told you about the 3 tests already. There's 25 questions, and in order to get a passing grade, and just to emphasize it, the 70% is highlighted. I guess it's something you may want to remember. A passing grade is 70%, and the one way you can remember that is that nobody, no matter how bright you are, on purpose, try to get 70%. None of you will get 70%. If you get 18 right, you're going to get 72%. And if you get 17 right, you're going to get 68%. So you can't get 70%, but that's the right answer. Okay? Now, we're going to be talking, most of this covers the Business and Performance Code, 12500 to 12544. That's the Service Agency section. And then there's the California Code of Regulations, also known as a Field Reference Manual, Title IV, Division 9. You don't have to remember all that. These are the way the things are divided up. Introduction, General Code, definitions in Chapter 4. By the way, there will be questions that will say reference Professions and Code Section 12500, or reference the California Code of Regulations, Title IV, Division 9, Section 2004, or 4000.2, or something like that. They'll never have any trick questions. You don't have to have those code name numbers memorized, so there's no trick questions in that sense. Okay, and various phrases and etc. I'm not going to read that. Now we're going to go through definitions, and this may seem kind of odd. We don't go through all of it. There's 6 pages of definitions in like 8-point type in the California Code of Regulations. The first one is the word accurate. Probably most of us know what that means. But what it means is that it meets all tolerances. And then you'll see in parentheses performance requirements. I want you to understand that the word tolerance and performance requirements are equivalent. They mean the same thing. And the reason I say both is that some test questions may refer to performance requirements. So when you see performance requirements, you're going, what the heck are they talking about? We're talking about tolerances. So when you check a scale, a taximeter, a CNG dispenser, a retail meter, also known as a gas pump, you have tolerances. So if it's in those tolerances, whatever those tolerances are, if it's inside those, if it passes, it's accurate. But, excuse me, wrong button. But in order to be correct, it has to be in tolerance, or it has to be accurate, and it has to meet the specification. Now, specifications are part of the code section. I'm going to get into those in the future. But the most common, or a very common situation is, let's say you have a meter and the ID plate has been knocked off. The specifications required. It doesn't matter what kind of meter, what kind of scale, what you have. If it's a commercial measuring or counting or weighing device, it has to have an ID plate with the manufacturer's name, a model number, and a serial number. If it doesn't have it, then it doesn't meet specifications. It might very well be accurate, but it doesn't meet specifications. So in order to be correct, it has to meet the tolerances, specifications, and there's actually going to be 4 things it has to meet. It must also be type approved, and I'll go through what type approval is a little bit later. And it cannot be adversely affected by the wind, weather, or radio frequency interference. Now, you'll note that that's highlighted, that's bolded, this is bolded, and this is bolded. Okay? That's a hint. So accurate means tolerances, correct means that it's type approved, it meets tolerances, specifications, type approved, and isn't affected by environmental factors. We have an analog device, a system of indications or recordings in which values are presented as a series of graduations in combination with an indicator. Okay, what does that mean? A system of indications. The easiest one is a clock on the wall. It has a series of indications, minutes or hours. It has a series of indications. Series of graduations subdivided. You have hours or you have minutes, and it's all subdivided. And in combination with an indicator. It's got 3 indicators. It has an hour indicator, a minute indicator, and a second indicator. For those of you, or most of the people here old enough, remember the old style gas pumps with the little dials that turn around? That's an analog device. The term for repair is to provide maintenance, to install, adjust, recondition, or service. Okay, these are terms. Just defining what the word repair means. Okay, we're dealing with now with non-retroactive and retroactive. We have 2 types of regulations. A regulation is either non-retroactive, and that means it applies to devices manufactured after an effective date. There's also some other things on there, but I'm not going to go through them. Okay? Applies to an effective date. If you can remember, applies after an effective date. And as an example, usually the dates are January 1st of the year. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that the legislature passed a regulation that said all gas pumps had to be painted blue, and it's effective as of today. At midnight today, it became effective. That means all the gas pumps manufactured and reported into the state after midnight this morning, or last night, on into the future, have to be painted blue. Non-retroactive applies as an effective date, today, into the future. Retroactive applies to all of them. So using the same example of blue gas pumps, if the legislature said that's going to be a retroactive regulation, not only all the gas pumps manufactured as of midnight last night into the future have to be painted blue, but all of them in service, whether they've been there for 20 years or not, have got to be painted blue. It affects all of them. Okay, so that's the difference. These, as of an effective date, as an example, the licensing requirement. As of January 1st, 2001, you had to have a service agent license. It wasn't retroactive. They didn't make you have one 5 years ago. It was as of that day you had to have one, and now into the future. Okay? Most regulations are non-retroactive. Again, placed into service, when you place a device into service, that you're telling the owner-operator that it's correct, which means it's accurate, meets specifications, is type approved, and is not affected by environmental factors. So there's going to be some repeats of some of these. We have the term over-registration and under-registration. I'll read it to you and explain. An indicated value that is more or greater than the actual value of the product measured. The simplest way I use is a scale. If you have a 10-pound weight and you set it on the scale, and it reads 11 pounds, the register, the indicator is greater than the actual value. The weight is 10 pounds. That's our standard. So we know it's 10 pounds. The scale says 11, so it's over registering. Under registering is the exact opposite. You put that 10-pound weight on the scale, it says 9 pounds. You know the actual is 10, but the indicated value is 9. That's under registration. Okay? Over registration is, it says it's more than it actually is. If you put 5 gallons into a can and you know it's exactly 5 gallons, but the meter says 5.1, that meter's over registering. It's greater, indicating greater than the actual value. Under registration, just the opposite. A commercial device is one where a weighing, measuring, counting device where a commodity is being sold or purchased. If you're working on a device inside a warehouse where they manufacture dog food and they're measuring liquids coming in and whatever it is that they weigh and put it into a can, okay, we don't consider that commercial. On the other hand, if they have a scale and they're weighing stuff coming in, they're paying somebody on it, that's commercial. So when you go to Ralph's or Albertsons or Vons and you buy bananas and it goes across a scale, that scale's commercial. Okay? And then you have also this, a device is any kind of equipment that's used to weigh or measure for commercial purposes. Type approval, this is it's a testing procedure that goes on in the state of California, but it also goes on in other places throughout the country. And when they pass the type approval process, whether it's a scale or a meter or water meter, electric meter, gas pump type, they get, from the state of California, they get a certificate of approval. If it's national, they get a certificate of conformance. And you'll also see it has an NTEP. Any of you that put devices in, you'll see an NTEP, and it'll have a number, an NTEP number. That's the certificate of conformance. Okay, a main graduation. Again, we're talking about definitions, which is why this kind of jumps around. A primary or principal subdivision of a graduated series of graduations. Well, what does that mean? Okay, the primary. So think of a ruler. A ruler is 12 inches wide. It's 1 foot, but it's divided into inches. So in my example, the primary indication, the primary graduate would be 1 inch. And then it's subdivided into a series of graduations, ½ inch, ¼ inch, 1/8, 1/16, 32nd, 64th, or 10th, hundredths, or what have you. Okay? So primary subdivision of a graduated series of graduations. That's the main graduation, the term for it. Okay, we're going to talk about some of the information required and your responsibilities. Okay, there have come up questions as from service agents to a county wage measure say, well, we really didn't do anything to the dispenser. We didn't notify you because we didn't do anything. We didn't really service it. Our definition is that if you receive payment for doing what we call a repair, and a repair again is to install, to repair, replace, a number of different definitions. So if you received money for it, you did a repair and you need to notify the county. A service agency employs an agent. So those of you who are working for somebody, say Southern California Gas, SoCal Gas is the agency, that's the company. The agent is you. You have a license and these have a registration number. Now, if you're self-employed, you're both. You will have a license for your company you, and you'll have a registration number for the company you, and a license number for you, the agent. Okay, you are required to have a copy of the California Code of Regulations, or Handbook 44. There is a difference, but they're pretty close. I'm not going to ask who has one. I've done that before, and I'm always disappointed. You have standards, whatever. If you're a scale company, you have weights. If you do gas pumps, you've got 5-gallon provers, or maybe 50 or 100-gallon provers. So the service agency's standards, that's your provers, that's your weights, whatever it is you compare, whatever it is you're fixing to, must be certified at least every 2 years. Notice that they're highlighted. They're underlined, they're bold, and they're in blue. That's a hint. Okay? At least every 2 years. all the weights and measures counties have their standards done every 2 years. They can never be done, they can go as long as 10 years if you have supporting data, but usually every 2 years is what's required. Okay, if a county sealer intends to suspend the registration of an agency, a copy of the proposed action, that's service agency, so the proposed action of suspending their registration, their ability to remove red tags, let's say, must be forwarded to the Department of Food and Agriculture. Not to the governor, not to the city council, but to the Department of Food and Agriculture. Okay, if that were to happen. All right, now we're getting down to your responsibilities. Each service agent or agency, you must notify a county, the county you worked in, of repairing, adjusting, placing in service any commercial weighing measuring device. Okay? It must be in writing and transmitted within 24 hours to be legal. So it has to be written, it has to be transmitted. So you can mail it, email it, fax it, carrier pigeon it, or hand deliver it. Okay? But it's got to be transmitted in 24 hours. You're also required to have suitable and sufficient standards. So if you're going to fix a truck scale, we don't want you coming out there with 2 cans of sand in a pickup truck, a little pickup truck. Okay, we want suitable standards and sufficient standards. If you're going to test a high flow meter that does 100 gallons a minute, it's not very good to be pumping it into a 5-gallon bucket. Okay, not suitable. The metric system is legal in the state of California, though very few people use it. It is in fact legal. Here's your legal, some more of your legal responsibilities. First, you have to have a license while you're here. You're taking care of that. Here's some more numbers. Remember I said it's 2 years, because I remember answering some of the questions, going over the tests, and people got this confused. 2 years for getting your standards tested. But your license is good for 5 years, as you all but 2 of you know, because you're here renewing your license. Okay, so your license is good for 5 years, your standards for 2. You have to get 70% or better, but none of you are going to get that. You're all going to get better, right? You do not have to be a resident of California, nor the United States, nor this universe if you don't wish to. You don't have to be a resident to be a service agent. All you have to do is make sure your check doesn't bounce and pass the test. Okay? Also, you have to be associated with an agency. So if those of you who have your license, the license is yours, even if the company's paying for it. But if you go independent next week or 3 months from now or 2 years from now, understand that you need to register as an agency. Okay? You need to register as an agency because the license by itself is not valid. Okay? Also, a service agent works as employed by a service agency. I put it both ways just to cover everything. Okay, everybody understands that. Okay, the service agent's identification, adhesive tag or label is just 5 things. When you work on a device, you need to place an adhesive tag or label on the device, and it has 5 things that are required. 1 is the name of your service agency, like Joe Rhodes Maintenance. Has to have the telephone number of the service agency. Okay? The name of the agency, the company, not you, unless you're the company. The telephone number of the agency. The registration number of the agency, not your license number, not yet. So those 3 things, those are the agencies, the name, telephone number, registration. The license number of you, the not license number you'll have today, and the date. Those 5 things. You can put more on. You can put the pictures of your children, your wife's name, you can put your address, you can put several things. But those 5 things are required. And I see a lot of service agency ones where people still initial them and don't put their license number down. And I actually know they have license numbers. So, your adhesive tag or label must be put in a conspicuous place. Those of you that work on small scales can't pick up the platter, put the thing on the bottom, and set it back down on the bottom. Okay? Can't do it. Has to be in a conspicuous place. Now you might ask, what's conspicuous mean? And I guess it's where I don't have to look very hard to find it. There is one exception, and that's retail meters. Those doing gas pumps get to put them inside. The only exception. Now, it's a misdemeanor for anyone, hear me okay? For anyone to obliterate or unlawfully remove a sealer's tag. What they're referring to is like a red tag or a blue tag that's placed a device out of service. Now, you folks have the authority to do that. You have the authority to remove them. Now, where this might apply to a service agent, and I know this would never happen, but where it might apply, which let's say it's, I don't know, Friday afternoon at 4:30 or 4:45, and you've got some kind of event plan, you know, your daughter's got her special play going on, and you've got to be there at 6, and you get there, and you take a look at it, and you can't fix that thing. You can't get it right and get home in time. So you pull the tag off and you hand it to the owner and say, I'll see you tomorrow or I'll see you Monday. Now you've unlawfully removed it because you didn't fix it. Okay? That would be the only case. Otherwise, you have the authority to do that. Okay? You have the authority to place a correct and type-approved device into service. Not just a new one, not just a repaired one, but it has to be correct, which means it's accurate, meets specifications. It also has to be type-approved, and it can't be affected by environmental factors. I keep repeating that for a purpose. I talked about the Field Reference Manual. All right. The California Code of Regulations, or the Field Reference Manual, or Handbook 44, whichever one you want to refer to, has two types of codes, the general and specific. The general code applies to all devices. Just out of curiosity, you'll notice that it's bolded. Okay? Specific code applies only to certain devices, such as Code Section 2.20 is scales. 3.30 is liquid measuring devices. Okay, so the general code applies to all devices, specific code applies to certain devices, and if there is ever a conflict or contradiction between the general code, not the general cod, which is a type of fish, but the general code and a specific code, the specific code takes precedent. That means that it is, in fact, the one that rules over the two. An example of that is the general code requires there be an ID tag that has the manufacturer's name, a model number preceded by the word model, MOD period or such, and serial number preceded by the word serial number, SN, S/N, etc., etc. Okay, that's what the general code is. Specific codes say, though, if you get to, say, a truck scale, it has to have a concentrated load capacity statement on it. If it's a high flow meter, it has to have the flow rates on it. If it's an electric meter, it has to have all sorts of information on it. So there you might find a conflict between the two. It's a specific code, always takes precedent. All right. California Code of Regulations is divided into 5, and you don't have to remember the number 5. It's applications, specifications, notes, tolerances, and user requirements. What an application is that it tells you what that device is for, such as 3.30 is liquid measuring devices. So you look at applications. As an example, let's say you worked on water meters, and you look at, well, you know, water's about as liquid as you can get. So you look at the 3.30, and you look at applications, and it says it's for fuels and oils and agricultural products, and then below it says it's not for water meters. Well, why isn't it for water meters? Well, water meters has their own code. Okay, so the application tells you what it applies to. Specifications are generally for the manufacturer. So if you were going to go out and build a water meter, you would go to the water meter code, you would look up specifications and see what's required for you to have on that meter. Now, here's something, and I didn't bold it, and I should have. Repeatability. A device shall be capable of repeating within its tolerances, its indications, and recorded representations. By the way, recorded representations means it's printed. Okay, that's what recorded means. So a device needs to repeat. And if you'll notice, it's under specifications. So I made an error. This should be highlighted, and it's a specification. So devices being capable of repeating is a specification. That's a hint. Okay? It should have been highlighted. It's not. It is a specification. And so the ability to repeat is a specification. Notes are the testing procedures we use. So when you go to the notes, it'll tell you how to do shift tests or increasing and decreasing load tests if you're talking about scales. And normal tests and special tests and things if you're talking about meters. Now what is a tolerance? A tolerance is the allowable error. Okay, so you have applications, tells you what it is, what that section applies to. You have specifications, which deals with repeating. You have notes, which tells you what the tests are. You have tolerances, which tells you when you do those tests, this is what should be happening. Okay. One of the other things under tolerance is if you make an adjustment, you want to adjust the device as close to zero error as practicable. Note it's in blue and it's underlined. Just a hint. Okay, that's under tolerances. Okay, user requirements. This applies to you and the operator owner of the device. User requirements. Ah, look, as an example, and this one is in blue. Another hint. So a specification is where a device needs to repeat. Suitable for equipment that shall be suitable for the environment in which it is used, including but not limited to the effects of wind, weather, and RFI, radio frequency interference. So, a user requirement means you're putting the right kind of device in service. So if somebody wants to buy and sell aluminum cans, you don't sell them at the jewelry store stand. Okay? If they want to sell gold, you don't use a 1,000-pound platform. You use the appropriate device for that particular service. But suitable for the environment, right here, this, remember that, suitable for the environment, that's a user requirement. Also deals when you place it into service. It has to be correct, okay, which is also type approved, and it has to be suitable for the environment. That's a user requirement also. Any violation of these regulations is a misdemeanor. Okay, when you install a device, it is to the manufacturer's instruction. It is not. It is not, absolutely not. There's no weights and measures booklet of how to install stuff, okay? We would refer to whatever the manufacturer says. Now, this is also a user's requirement. So if somebody has a high flow meter that runs at 60 gallons a minute, it should have a 1-inch pipe or 1 1/4-inch pipe going into it, and somebody puts a 3/4-inch pipe and the thing runs at 10 gallons a minute, which is below what it should be running, as an example, we wouldn't even test it. We just tag it as an improper installation because it's not the way the machine was designed to be run, manufacturer's instructions. Okay? Any characteristics of foundation supports or any other detail of the installation shall not adversely affect the performance of the device. But here's some exterior types of things that cannot adversely affect it, and these are all user requirements. Okay? Again, a device is correct, must meet accuracy, specification requirements, and not be affected by adverse weather or RFI. A device and its associated components that affect metrological aspects. What's metrological aspects? Basically the tolerance, the way it indicates, okay, must be type approved. And therefore have a, if it's done in California, therefore have a certificate of approval. Any software added or interfaced, already placed in service. This is actually applies, the way this really applies is to truck scales, where they used to have an indicator and somebody hand wrote down what the truck weighed, and then they got computers and they tied them together and the information comes straight from the computer into the, straight from the scale indicator into the computer, and then they can manipulate it and change it. So if the trucks are all overweight, they go in and change the number so they're under 80,000 pounds, as an example. That's why they're required to be type approved too. So any software that's interfaced to an already in-service device needs to be type approved. Yes, sir?
I had a question about this type approval stuff.
Oh, no, there's no questions on type approval. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, how do you know it's type approved when you look at the device?
Well, you don't.
That you
Okay, there are, usually the newer ones are required to have an NTEP number.
Okay, so the
So-
NTEP number would be a giveaway.
Right, now, we found actually in this county, there was a scale that had an NTEP number on it, and it didn't apply to that one. The manufacturer just put it on there. But that should be on there, that is a requirement. So like with a CNG, where
Right.
there's a lot of unapproved devices.
Right.
Because they were never approved initially when they first started doing CNG. They'll have an NTEP number on the ID plate, that is a requirement. And so if it says NTEP and then it'll have like 99 dash, it's usually 2 numbers as the first number, and that's the year it was approved. Then it'll have a dash and some other number.
But is there a website or something?
Yes,
that we
you
look at?
can actually just call me or call the county or call Sacramento,
Okay.
and then we'll go look it up for you. There is, California has a website, and then NIST also has a website that allows you to go in and look up, and that's the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, and they have a website. If you place a device into service in more than one county, so say you work in Ventura, LA, and Orange all in the same day, you need to notify within 24 hours, transmit it, each county separately. You can't call LA and say, by the way, I was in Ventura and Orange, could you give them a call and tell them I'm there? Okay, you need to notify the counties individually. And when you repair or work or service or maintain or whatever those definitions are, you must put that adhesive tag or label on the device, on each one that you worked on. So if you are doing grocery stores and you've got a brand new grocery store and you go in and you service all the entire front section, every cash register, you put that ID on each one. If you go into a gas station and you do every other dispenser, that ID, that adhesive tag or label goes on each dispenser that you worked on. Again, you should not adjust the adjustment mechanisms, which are for normal wear and use, to compensate for defective or abnormal installation, badly worn and defective parts. They need to be replaced. Okay, so you're not going to create, if it should be replaced, you need to replace it. Now, and you'll notice it's in blue and it's underlined. If you cannot replace or cannot repair an placed out of order device, a red tag device, you must put back on the red tag. Okay? An inspector, put it out of order. You, for whatever reason, cannot fix it at that moment. You need to leave it out of order. So what you do is you replace, you put that red tag back on. Tape it on, wire it on, however it happens to work. Okay? Again, you want to make any adjustments on the tolerances. You want to get them as close to a 0 error as possible. Not just make them intolerant, tolerance barely. All right. So, if you cannot fix a problem, oh, excuse me, I didn't read all of that. If you pull up, when you place a device into service, whatever it is, you're saying that it is correct and accurate, okay? Which means if I come and do a battery test, it's going to pass. My old sealer, when I was in Ventura, he told us, don't put down on your red tag what's wrong. And the reason for that is that if, an example is, let's say I come up to a gas pump and one of the indicators is burned out. And the way they are now, they have only one indicator. So if the total gallons is burned out, I'll red tag the whole dispenser because nobody knows for sure how many gallons they're buying because a digit's burned out. That's it. I ain't testing anything. I'm driving to the next one. So you come up, if I put digits burned out, and you go, okay, no problem, and 15 minutes later you replace it and you drive off, pull the red tag, notify me in 24 hours, I come out 3 days later, I start pumping gas and find out they're all out of tolerance. Guess what? You got a notice of violation because you placed into service a device that's not correct. So you need to run those other tests. And this is somewhat of an issue for those that only replace nozzles and hoses on gas pumps, because if you're not at least running some liquid through them, you don't know what else might be wrong. You're just assuming that that's the only problem that's there. Again, a device must be capable of repeating, and that's the specification. Again, any adjustable elements, you don't adjust them to compensate for badly worn or defective parts. So where something maybe is barely in tolerance. Okay, anyone can work on a device. Owners can work on their own equipment, but they cannot place them into service until either you or a weights and measures official come out and test them. So if they want to work on a calibration, they can, but technically they cannot place it back into service until they either hire you to come out and do it, or they have the weights and measures come out and do it. And I do believe that's the end of it. And we still have 17 minutes on that roll. So we're well ahead of time. Any questions? No? Yes, sir.
What happens if the dealer fixes it, calls you back up, and it's still out of...
Then we would just tag it again and off we
You
go.
tag him?
He could spend the rest of his life trying to fix it. Okay? Could spend the rest. I'm not talking about if an owner, since I know you work for a service station, if they go out once a month with their own 5-gallon cans and just test them to make sure their meters are running, that they're just testing them. I mean, checking it. I shouldn't say testing, but they're checking them. And that we're not talking about that. But if they actually want to repair it, they can do it, but they can't use it after they repair it, unless they're a licensed service agency and an agent, which they may be. I mean, there's nothing that stops them from doing that, but they would have to do that. Matter of fact, on some of the grocery stores, I don't know if Vons is here, but Vons has their own, and there's a smaller company in Orange County where they have their own service agents that work for them. So it's their store, and they work. But they're still responsible, you know. So they're still gonna, you know, they still have to notify, and we go out and test them, and if they're going to be responsible if something's wrong. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I don't know if you have the answer to this, but...
I don't, actually. I don't, so save yourself.
We had an issue when we were calibrating the CNG pumps with this issue about the wet hose and the dry hose. And I never got an answer to that.
It's a wet hose, even though it's not wet.
Right. But, as you know, there's pressure in the vehicle that's filling up, and then there's more pressure in the hose. So that has to be counted too, or not? See, that's what I didn't have the answer
Okay,
to.
I guess I'm misconstrued. I don't quite understand. I think I do, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
He works for CNG, compressed natural gas. So a vehicle pulls up and they've got 2,800 psi on their
Say a
tank.
vehicle pulls up and has only 1,000 psi.
1,000 psi.
The hose has 36.
That's right.
Okay, so
As it
that's...
starts, so it's wet.
So it's
Up
wet.
to that nozzle, it's wet. If it was a gas pump, you've got liquid all the way up to that nozzle.
Okay, but it's not registering.
But
When-
it shouldn't. It
Right,
shouldn't.
when he puts up, he hasn't authorized the dispenser yet.
Until he opens that nozzle, nothing should happen.
Okay.
Anyway, go ahead. I think I know what this question
Okay,
is.
so the little bit of gas that's in there, does that have to be counted?
No. In other words, when he arrives, when you drive up,
Right.
you have a hose,
Right,
and you hook it on, and it's wet. It's got gas at 3,000 psi up to that nozzle.
right.
He opens it up.
It's a dry hose now.
Well, it's wet. He pulls up, it says 0. Generally, people hook it up and then turn on the indicator. It's
Right.
different on a gas station. I'll use a gas station as an example, then we'll just get... You come up, you got a wet hose.
Mhm.
Okay, you got gasoline all the way up to that nozzle, you stick it in, you don't open anything up, and if you do open something, nothing's supposed to come out until it zeroes itself, and then that meter starts running. When you're done, and it stops, and it shuts off, and you pull it out, you started with gasoline up to that nozzle,
Right?
you're ending with gasoline up to that nozzle.
Got it.
Okay, with propane, with CNG, it's the same thing. With propane, it's the same thing. You come up, you've got gas, 3,000 psi, up to that nozzle.
Okay.
When you're done, you have it at 3,000 psi up to that nozzle.
Got it.
Okay? What you don't want is to have an empty space so that when you turn it on, it has to fill that hose and you're paying for it and you don't get to keep it. Because when you know, when if it's got a void in there and not gas all the way to the nozzle, then you have to fill that hose and you're paying for it. And when you, for those of you that buy gasoline, which is everybody here, you ever pick up the nozzle, flip it on, and it jumps 5 cents while you're holding the nozzle in your hand? You just pay to fill that hose up, and you don't get to keep that 5 cents.
Is that a violation?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, and we've red tagged the spot, on the spot.
Once was at a gas station, the guy on duty was going around and filling a can out of what was left in the hoses for his own car. Now, was that a weights and measures, or is it just plain fraud or something?
Well, he shouldn't be able to without turning the dispensers on. So it would be a violation. You'd know more about this one than I would, but you should not be able to get gasoline more than maybe dribbling a
You know,
little
he was
bit.
getting something though. enough-
Well, he could be, if you top up and you have the collapsible boot, you could have gasoline in there. Most of you probably one time pulled it off and got gas pouring down the side of your car because somebody else topped up before you and filled that boot up with gasoline. And they could be going and cleaning all the gasoline out of that boot so that some woman or man with dressed nicely doesn't pull it out and get it all over their pants or shoes or dress or something.
Pre-boot days.
Then I don't know. I mean, the nozzle's not supposed to operate if the dispenser's not running. But maybe a little bit drips out, but very little. It's not supposed to.
Sometime back. I don't know.
Any other questions? No? Good to go? You guys ready for this test?
Yes.
It's easy.
Break?
Yeah, we're gonna give like a 15-minute break. Is that right?
20-minute break, 200-hour break? Okay, what do you want, 15 to 10?
10.
10.